Hello and welcome to the Juddmonte Farms FanPage podcast. This is the first in a new series that we're going to be doing, or at least I'm going to be doing. My name is Matt T. Child. You'll know me from the page because I'm one of the admins and also the creator of the page. We did this, me and another admin did this a number of years ago, but for some reason never really took off. I don't know why, just one of those things. But we're going to give it another whirl now and see how popular they are and how much people enjoy listening to them and how much people want them. And if you do want them, then we'll carry on because they're fun for us to do, I hope, and hopefully they're fun for you to listen to as well. So let's see how we go. This is number one anyway. Quickly, before we start and before I introduce the person who's doing this with me, I want to just mention the admin situation on the page. Many of you will have seen over the course of the last week or so, I've been advertising for a new admin. Pretty stressful trying to find one and waiting for people to come forward. Excuse me. Someone did last Friday by the name of Chris Ellams. And after a brief conversation, we agreed to give him a trial, or I agreed to give him a trial. There wasn't a committee or anything like that. And you will have seen that he posted yesterday and today about a 2-year-old of Gosden's that ran at Yarmouth called Side Shop. I think basically he's now on board and he's going to be a permanent fixture going forward, certainly this year. And also Gillian Seed, who posted on the page earlier in the year before the whole coronavirus thing occurred. She will be back next year as well. So there'll be 3 of us doing the reports next year. I probably won't be as heavily involved as I have been, but I think having 3 people is better than 1. Certainly it makes my life a bit easier, and I think 3 voices and opinions just gives greater depth to the page as a whole. So that's that sorted. This podcast, what we're going to do, me and my guest, we're going to go through each UK trainer. And you can follow us doing this if you go to the Juddmonte Farms fan page on Facebook and you go to the notes section and you'll see there's a whole host of notes on there, different subjects, all sort of Juddmonte related. And the trainer notes you'll find in there. And we're going to go through them one by one so you can click on them and follow as we go along. And we're just going to be talking about each trainer's horse, not every one of them, but the winners they've had so far, the winners they may have through the autumn and the winter to the end of the season, and the 2-year-olds they have, if they do have any 2-year-olds for Juddmonte this year, and just pinpointing some who we're looking forward to seeing based on pedigree. Usually you'd base them off future engagements, the group entries later on, the Racing Post, the Royal Lodge, the Dewhurst, stuff like that, but they've not come out yet. And I'm not too sure when they will be coming out. So we can't base them off that, but we can go off pedigrees, and that's usually a good indicator anyway. So without further ado, my guest is a friend of mine called Craig Walker, who isn't affiliated with the page as such, but I've known him for a long time. And when I broached the subject a little while ago, he was someone who came to me and said that he'd be interested. He's very knowledgeable about racing. He follows Juddmonte. So, and me and him get on really well up until this point anyway. I think by the time we finish this, it's a broken friendship. But we'll see if we can last at least for an hour. So Craig, he's going to be doing this with me. And I'm sure he's looking forward to it as much as I am.
Oh yeah, definitely. Thank you very much for letting me get involved. Obviously, as you've mentioned, we were good friends before this, so hopefully we'll last an hour. Yeah, I mean, I've been following Juddmonte for a long time, not as long as Matt has, obviously. Obviously it's a great setup, and I'm just pleased to be involved, just chatting about racing. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
That, really.
Absolutely.
So, without further ado, we'll go to the trainer notes and we'll do this alphabetical order, which makes it fair. So we'll start with Rafe Beckett, who he didn't have any older horses this year, but the 3-year-olds he has. They've not done too badly. I think half of them have won, or at least two of them have won, to my notes, and they would be Summit Reach and Suntide, who would be the standout on pedigree, at least, seeing as she's a half sister to Midday, and she got that all-important win to her name at Chepstow recently.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, obviously a second run debut, fifth next time. She literally needed every yard of the trip last time just to get up in the last stride. It was a smart performance, and I definitely think that there's more to come from Suntide. Summit Reach, as you mentioned, had won by 5 lengths on a previous occasion, but I think maybe has found it a little tough moving into handicaps. Would you agree?
I totally agree. He was one of those at the start of the year that I was quite, especially after he won. I know his 2-year-old form was quite good. I think, although he was fifth, it was at Kempton, his second run, that form worked out to be quite good. I'm sure the winner didn't run too bad in the 2000 Guineas, if my memory serves me correct. Huey Morrison's horse. Don't quote me on that. But yeah, since he's gone...
Yes, it was Starcat. Didn't run too bad. Run a sort of midfield race there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it wasn't exactly a terrible performance, and like we're seeing, Summit Reach obviously come out and won quite comfortably at Chelmsford. Pretty much made.
Chelmsford, yeah. I thought it was Wolverhampton, but yeah, somewhere like that, yeah. And he's just, I thought he'd be a nice horse over 12 furlongs this year or 11 furlongs, but he's just been disappointing. Since he's gone handicapping, he's just not. He likes to make the running, but he gets to a stage 2 furlongs out, and then that's it. He's gone. I think he's going to be penciled in for a little operation soon, and then it wouldn't surprise me if he ended up down in Australia. He's a 3 parts brother to Harlem, who's 2-time winner of the Australian Cup down there, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if that's where he ends up, because I don't think Juddmonte will be persevering with him into next year anyway. Excuse me.
Yeah, well, I mean, like I say, he kind of went in class 2, class 3. That seems to be the ceiling so far from what we've seen, unless obviously there's any improvement comes about from what you've mentioned. But yeah, I would agree. I think maybe a trip down under might happen.
I saw a comment you commented on the Juddmonte Farms page after this lad ran at Lingfield the other day, John Locke. Who runs at he runs again at Lingfield tomorrow.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah, and I mean, as I kind of said there, I was very taken with the initial performance. The second, I thought he was a real good thing to follow up next time. And I mean, the way he travelled absolutely sweetly in front. It looked as though the race was all over. I remember watching it and thinking, wow, he's going to win by any amount of lengths here. Only to be mowed down by a Gosden newcomer who probably is above average when you look at the distances between them. I mean, Faisal, I think it was the name of the horse, who came and obviously swept down the outside under a drive from Holly Doyle. I think it was our first ride for the new owners. But they were 8 lengths clear of the rest. So based on that, I would say these two are much better than anything, obviously, that was in that race. I can see him picking up a race, and hopefully it'll be tomorrow. I know he's skinny odds to do so, but deservedly so. He's run to a good level of form, and he's definitely better than maiden class. And he could improve for the win, and go into a nice handicap somewhere towards the back end of the season. But yeah, I definitely think he's got a very good and strong chance tomorrow.
I wrote that. I was right. I think I wrote that report at Lingfield last time when he was second, and I was watching the race and approaching the final furlong. I'd already written it out in my head, about how easily he was going to win, and then this thing just flew on the outside and got him. And he's improved. He was supposed to run at Chepstow. He was supposed to make his debut at Chepstow, and he was withdrawn. He wouldn't go into the stalls, and he had to have a stalls test.
Mm-hmm.
So even from there, he has come quite some way. I mean, I don't think he's a superstar or anything, but like you, I do think he'll pitch up into a nice handicap somewhere or other down the line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I think he's got all the potential to do that. And like I say, that Faisal form might come good yet. They might, obviously, we haven't seen that one run again since. So I guess it'll just be interesting to see what that one does next to maybe see where his ceiling is.
Talking about potential, the one I had down as certainly one who would go places this year was Jacksonian, Frankel Colt, who's a half brother to a Group 3 winner called Jetaway, who Henry Cecil used to train. He was runner-up in his debut at Newmarket last year. I think it was to a Godolphin horse called Al Sahali, something. He named something like that. Who went on to? I'm pretty sure he's won a listed race. And he's been group placed. I think he may have been placed in the Solario last year or something like that. And that form alone stood him out. That was midsummer. He never ran again until this spring or when racing resumed anyway. And it was at Newbury, and I thought he was bitterly disappointing. I mean, he's not run, so whether something was amiss.
Yeah, I mean, I watched the race back and like having seen how the race sort of panned out. I think officially it was declared as being good, but I thought the ground looked a bit more tacky, and also he had been off, obviously, as we mentioned, for practically a year after that initial debut. So he might have been inclined to need the run. However, as well, the way the race panned out, they all ended up on the far side where he was pretty much on his own on the near side. Yeah. So the race split might not have suited either. I just think that maybe it might be worth sticking with him for the next one to see how he gets on. But yeah, I must admit, after that initial run last year, you thought he would pick up a race like this. But that's not to say that there isn't, potential. And just to add, you mentioned earlier about the Godolphin one. It was a one called Military March who ran in the 2000 guineas. So
even better, yeah.
So like there is like a fair line of form there. So I wouldn't give up on him just yet. I think that maybe he might have been inclined to need that run, and obviously with the way this year has gone. Obviously with coronavirus and things like that, racing obviously resumed a lot later. So there might be a chance that maybe if he comes out again, he could run well third time.
Yeah, that's because he was fourth in the Gillies Military March, and he won the Autumn Stakes last year after beating Jacksonian. So yeah, you've got me excited about Jacksonian again. He must win a race. I'll be stunned if he didn't. And he's had no entry since that run at Newbury. So I'm guessing something must have been wrong. He wasn't 100%.
Maybe something's come back from that, because I mean, you would have thought that he would have been turned out by now. But there's still potential, and hopefully, if they get him back on track, he can get his sort of racing back on track too.
Yeah. On the 2-year-old front, he's had quite a few runs so far. And personally, I think we may have seen the best of them already in Pomelo.
Yeah, definitely.
Filly out of Emulus, who was a Group 1 winner for Dermot Weld. And it was a newcomer's fillies novice, I think it was, at Newbury last month. And they didn't seem to go much of a gallop, but she settled and she just quickened away from them like she was just in a totally different league.
That's it. I mean, she totally was. Different class, really. Considering a little bit keen, she done it really well. Win by 5 lengths.
Over 6 or 7?
It was over 7. Yeah. So, she does look above average. I did notice that she does have a Group 3 entry for Goodwood sort of in the near future. So there's a good chance that, they do think she is above average. And that, like, even in terms of the 2-year-olds, like obviously how you mentioned that we might have a sort of favoured one, I definitely think she's the one that I want to be with. Like, she's... Yeah, she's done it really well. I mean, for even, like I say, even from a betting perspective, the money was down. They knew that she was probably above average, and she showed it. And I definitely think there's more improvement to come. Absolutely.
She's a Mayfoal as well, so there should definitely be improvement from her. Fabulous ran at Newbury recently, made his debut. He's a brother to that lunatic, Monarch's Glen. I was a fan of his. I'm not being derogatory there, but he was a handful. Probably still is. I know he's in America now. He shaped all right. He came there and then he got tired. He could win a race, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely think there's a maiden and Fabulous. Didn't do anything really wrong, sort of, just off the pace, come to make a challenge, just kind of weakened out of it. Didn't do a lot wrong. A couple of other horses had the odd run here and there, so had a little bit more experience. So I think with that under the belt, there's definitely room to improve.
Are there any other 2-year-olds from this yard you want to give a mention to? I mean, there's another Frankel filly down at the bottom, Vizilla, I think so you say it. She's out of a really good broodmare in Arabesque, who's done really well with her runners. I think she went through a period where she didn't produce a foal for a little while, but she's back now. And I think you've got to take her offspring seriously.
Yeah, absolutely. And, there's obviously there's a couple of other unraced ones. But yeah, Vizella's another one that looks the part on paper. So I definitely think could come out and make an interesting debut, hopefully a winning one. But I definitely would like to see her involved soon.
They make 2-year-olds this lot. She does produce 2-year-old. In actual fact, I think all her offspring have at least run at 2. I mean, her standout was Showcasing, who was a high-class 2-year-old. But usually they do. So if she doesn't run this year, I'd probably be a bit worried. But she's another Frankel, and everyone loves a Frankel, don't they?
Yeah, everyone loves Frankel.
Everyone loves Frankel. So that's Rafe Beckett. We'll move on now, and next alphabetically is Roger Charlton, who started slowly, but his horses now are banging form. He punched in, I think was it 3 or 4 winners on the trot recently he had for Juddmonte. We'll start with the older horses quickly, and then we'll move on. I suppose the main older horse, Headman, he was a 2-time Group 2 winner last year in France, has had 1 run, Prince of Wales' Stakes at Royal Ascot, and it was a disaster.
Yeah, to say the least, unfortunately. I mean, don't get me wrong, obviously Group 1 level, it's always going to be tough. He had the form, though, potentially put him right in the mix, but he pulled way too hard.
He did that at Newbury last year on his reappearance. He just pulled like a tack, and he's a great big colt as well. And
but that's it.
No chance.
Yeah, he's big in the chest, and he pulls like a good horse. Like, he knows he's got the gears and stuff like that, and he wants to go. Possibly that probably didn't suit him, of course, and obviously that's probably why he's ended up at the back. It might have also needed the run as well. Obviously, he'd been off for the best part of 9 months. So, obviously it was always going to be a tough reintroduction. I can see that he's also entered in the Irish Champion Stakes.
Coming up last year.
So, he gave it a good go in that last year, as you mentioned. There's no reason why he can't improve for the run. He just
Would you not be surprised if he went straight there, though?
Oh no, not at all. I think he'll go straight there. Personally, I don't really see any races in between that I can envision him running. And given that he didn't get beat too far, I mean, he was only beaten roughly about 3 lengths or so last year. Against behind horses like Magic 1, Andy Van Dyke, so they were all up in the Group 1 category. I think that if he can just hang on to being that over keen, like not being too keen in any the sense, he can definitely go close. But I think because of the way the racing season's gone, he's probably going to go there with one run.
Yeah, I suppose you have to take that into account that races have stacked up, haven't they? And yeah, I was hoping to see him in something like the Rose of Lancaster at Haydock. I thought they would have dropped him into a Group 3 or something like that, just to give him a bit of confidence before taking another chance.
Yeah, like a nice confidence booster would have been probably ideal. Yeah,
but as you say, given everything this year, it's. There hasn't been a lot of time, and I mean, he may have had an issue. He may not. I don't know personally. I'm not privy to any kind of info like that, so
yeah,
we just have to wait and see with him.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I said, he's a nice, strong call. He'll give it everything. It's just I would just like to see him just manage that keenness a little bit, and he can definitely mix it with the best.
Blue Mist finally got his win at Ascot recently. In the International Stakes? He was bitterly unlucky it wasn't the Wokingham, it was the Silver Wokingham at the Royal Meeting itself, but back up to 7 furlongs. I think Ryan Moore was in the saddle that day, and he ran out an impressive winner.
He was very impressive.
And he looks like a horse who, I'm not sure what mark he's on at the minute, but I know he was entered in something at York last week, but it wouldn't surprise me if he's in a listed race next time out. Given his height.
Well, this is it. I mean, he's been steadily improving. So over the course of the last 2 years or so, finally got that win at Ascot, obviously to make up for the Royal Ascot, where he was probably just a touch unlucky. Just obviously his big 19 runner field, but then obviously managed to come out at Ascot in July. Big win under Ryan Moore. Obviously that's going to put his mark up a little bit more. Would he be maybe something like, I genuinely think he's listed class. I think he can mix it into that now. Would he maybe consider like one of those big handicaps, like the Cambridgeshire or something?
I don't know. I think he's.
Would you think he'd be too sort of high for that? Too far?
Too far for it. I think he loves 7 furlongs at Ascot. I mean, he races as if he wants a mile. I mean, he's bred to he's bred to stay actually, but they've tried him over at sprints, so. No, I don't think he'll go that far. I think the entries for the Cambridgeshire came out. I'm not sure he's in that though. No, I think if they can find it, if there's a 7 furlong race at Ascot at some point, which I think there might be. I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but I think there might be something. I could see him going.
Something like the October Stakes might be something I could see. That's for 7 furlongs, obviously in October, as you can guess. And I would imagine that would be like the sort of race you're talking about.
Yeah. Get him back at Ascot. That's where he performs. He's a little bit more exposed compared to another Kingman called Tempest, who did he win at Newbury last time, or was he awarded?
He did. He was awarded the race. The only reason that I know is because I know that my partner Claire had a bet on the race on a horse called Overright, which dragged him halfway across the track.
Yeah.
And he was desperately unlucky not to win, actually, given that he was carried across. Obviously, Jason Watson had to switch him out. He was desperately unlucky not to get up on the actual line. Obviously went down by a head, but then was awarded it in the steward's room anyway. It was the right decision, really. The best horses finished second in that case. He was always gaining at the line, so there was no doubt really about the result.
Now, you'd think that we would plan stuff like this, but we haven't. You just mentioned the Cambridgeshire. I can't. I'm not sure if he's been given an entry, but he's the kind of horse I think. No,
I was going to say, I mean, between the two of them, Blue Mist and Tempest, I was thinking Blue Mist had potential to get the distance, whereas Tempest, I feel, is also another competitor for that type of race.
If he wants it.
If he wants to, he's definitely got a chance. especially seeing as like the way he was gaining all the time at the line. Obviously ended up winning the race in the stewards room, but he's improving, and he's the type of horse that could be a little bit of a handicap lot and maybe be a little bit better than handicap sort of material in time.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, he's bred. He's a half brother to Time Test, who did really well for this yard, and I mean, he's really lightly raced. I mean, he's only had 2 races in the last 14, 15 months. They really have taken their time with him, or been forced to take their time with him. So there should be plenty of improvement to come from him. I think he's I was surprised he ran as well as he did. I mean, the fact that he won at Newbury, I wasn't surprised on ability, but I was surprised given the length of time he's had off and how delicate he seems to be. But so I was really impressed. I was really chuffed that he won at Newbury. That came off a mark of 91. He'll probably, I don't know if he has gone up, or he probably has done by now. He will have gone up a few pounds for that. But I still think he's well handicapped. I think he could be a stakes horse by the end of the year.
Yeah, absolutely, and I would agree with that.
Right. Right. I know none of us want to answer this one. The big question: quadrilateral.
Yeah, I've been waiting for this one.
I mean, take over.
Yeah, I mean, my honest opinion is quadrilateral is a Group 1 horse. There's no doubt about it. Obviously, she won the Fillies Mile. She stayed that entire 1 mile trip and obviously got up to win that. I just feel that this year it just hasn't quite worked out, and for whatever reason, like, I don't know, the last run at Sandown, obviously recently, I just felt there was always a chance that she could win that. I watched it back again, and I'm still watching it and thinking quadrilateral is going to come through here and just take over and score comfortably by length and a half, sort of easing down at the line. And it just doesn't happen. The turn of foot just didn't seem to be there. This was a real good opportunity for her against, granted, some more experienced horses, a lot of older types in Bills and Brook, Lavender's Blue, last year's winner. But I just feel that even though that turn of foot wasn't there, she was still kind of gaining at the line. My feeling is that you can either go down in trip or up in trip, and I'd be more inclined to go up in trip. Maybe 1 mile 2 for me, maybe give her one go at that to see if she can stay that distance, because I think that now in the mile category there's too many horses that I think have possibly improved past her, like Love, for example.
I don't think she'll win a Group 1 over a mile.
Yeah.
I can't. I mean, I know Roger Charles said afterwards that.
Yeah, I kind of see it happening again. Not at a mile. I think realistically, the next for me would be to sort of go up in trip. Again, I noticed she's got a entry in the Maitland Stakes over a mile. But for me, I think the move is to move up in trip. 1 mile 2 is where I would possibly go next, and then at least try her out, see how she goes, because she doesn't seem to have the full gears that are needed to be a top miler. She's a good miler, don't get me wrong. She'll probably, if she knocks around in the Group 3 listed category, she'll probably pick something up. But when you know that she is a really top class filly, like underneath everything, she's got the ability. I just think that maybe it's time to move up in distance. Maybe 1 mile 2 is the right sort of move. Then we can see how she goes. Obviously, after that, then make decisions moving for the future.
I know Roger Charlton said after Sandown that for all intensive purposes, she needed that race. She blew hard. She hadn't had much work beforehand. But even so, that was a gilt-edged opportunity, I thought, given she didn't have a penalty.
Yep.
Conditions were in her favour. And I mean, I watched the race back. She another stride after the line. She was back in 5th. She she really struggled in that race. I didn't think she was going to win at any stage. I must be honest, and it would not surprise me if they went for the matron. I'm not. I don't want to say dig their heels in and try and prove a point, but it just wouldn't surprise. Personally, I would go for the Pride Stakes, which is over 10 furlongs. It's another Group 3 at Newmarket, I think in October. If it's run, I'm sure it will be. And then, you have a decision to make whether you keep her in training for another year or you retire her or you give her one more go. I mean, if she was to win, you could look at something abroad for her, a
Yeah.
Group 1 race over 10 furlongs. Other than that, I don't see what option they have. I don't see what options they have left. She's not going to win a Group 1 mile.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, to me, I'm not sure she'd say 12 furlongs. I'd be worried given how she can take a hold.
Yep.
But I'll be very surprised if they're not considering now that they have to go to 10 furlongs. They have to.
I think it's the logical step.
Yeah.
Because like I said, you've kind of got a scenario now where we've tried a mile. We even had a penalty kick here, which didn't work out. So now where do we go? Do we go up and trip? Do we go down and trip? I can't say I'm going down and trip because I don't think she'll have the gears for 6-7 furlongs. So that to me is not an option. So the only way is to go up, and she seems to keep going. Like she kept on in the Group 3. So there's a lot of potential that 10 furlongs would be more suitable. As you mentioned, I don't think 12 would work. I think that might be too far. But again, you would probably know better after trying her out at 10.
Yeah. Are there any other of the 3-year-olds you want to mention? I mean, we've got fillies like Tacitly, who won at Haydock the other day, and It's a Given, who a bit like, who was we talking about before? Summit Reach. She's been a bit
similar sort of profile, isn't it? Yeah. Got a couple of wins racked up and then kind of hit a little bit of a wall. I think, unfortunately, probably going to need to drop a pound or two in the handicap before we'll see wins again. Tacitly, as you mentioned, dropped the 6 seems to have kind of worked in terms of like what they're showing. But yeah, that's pretty much the thing with those. Because Tacitly was running over a mile early on and then seems to have dropped to sort of 6 furlongs, which seemed to work the oracle a little. But it'll be interesting to see if they stick with 6 or whether they'll go back up and trip. But I think if maybe they give Tacitly another go over around about the 6 furlongs, I think she'll probably be suited by that, especially if she's getting the softer ground, which she seems to like.
Yeah, she ran well on it. I think both times at Haydock she's run well on soft ground. The 2-year-olds, Roger Charlton's got a perfect record so far. He's had 2 runners and both of them have won. Lucid Dreamer was the first one, who you mentioned Pomelo's ended up in the Prestige at Goodwood at the weekend. I think Lucid Dreamer's in there as well.
Yep.
She won at Kempton first time out from the front against a previous winner, I believe. And then we had Beheld, who the Tendu filly, she won, the total reverse. She got up in the final stride at Newbury recently. They look like 2 really promising fillies.
Definitely. Lucid Dreamer, very impressive from the front. That was one of the ones I watched a little bit earlier on today just to kind of get an idea of how she done. And yeah, very impressive.
I like the fact you've taken this seriously.
Well, I had to do a little bit of research on a couple of them, but yeah. Lucid Dreamer was one, and I was very impressive debut. Pretty much made all against, as you mentioned, a Godolphin horse that had won before, carrying a penalty, but they drew a long way clear of everyone else, and I think they could be the 2 obviously best horses in that race. So I think there's definitely potential, especially with the entry in the Group 3, as we mentioned for Pomelo. There's a chance that Lucid Dreamer might be a bit above average. Beheld, a very nice win as well. Obviously staying on really strongly, beating good old Whiskey and Chips. I love that name. I think that was a really good name for a horse. But yes, very impressive, and I think both of them could be, definitely able to mix it in a decent race. I was definitely more excited about Lucid Dreamer, though. I definitely think there's definitely prizes to be won with her.
Yeah. Beheld, I mean, I don't know if I'm alone in this. There was just a bit of quadrilateral about her with the way she came through late. Quadrilateral did similar on her debut last year. So if we're still doing these podcasts in 12 months' time, we can talk about how Beheld should be going up to 10 furlongs.
Yeah, maybe so.
But no, I really, I liked her. I liked the way, I liked how professional she was, and I do. I think there's plenty more to come from her. In terms of the ones still to run, I mean, he really has been sent on paper anyway. A really good bunch. You got Boltaway, who is out of Proviso, who's a multiple Grade 1 winner in America. You've got Keeper, who's a Frankel half brother to Alocasia and Set Piece. You've got Ludicia, who's by Frankel out of African Rose, which makes her a sister to Fair Eva. And Quilted, another Frankel, who is Quadrilateral's full sister.
Yeah.
So,
that was my nominated 2-year-old as well, of the newcomers. So yeah, being a full sister to Quadrilateral, again, as you mentioned, very well related, and a family that obviously Roger has done very well with, as we know. So yeah, I'd be quite excited to see Quilted.
It'd be funny if she made her debut next year in a 1.5 mile maiden at Catterick, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
That would say something, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
But they look a really strong bunch on paper, and you've got another one, Innovator, who's closely related to Headman and the likes. So it's he must have been rubbing his hands when he got that list through of 2-year-olds he'd be having this year.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they were all ones that he's had relatives for, or similar types. So yeah, he must have been very pleased with what he got.
Talking about pleased with what they've got, John Gosden, who he can do no wrong, can he? I think he's taken the mantle over, hasn't he, from Henry Cecil, Sir Henry Cecil, I should say. I think he's Juddmonte's principal trainer. Enable. Were you surprised she didn't go up to York?
In a way, yes, but in some ways, no. I think more what they're looking at is they're probably looking to plan a route where they don't overdo it in some ways. Maybe they thought that maybe the Yorkshire race, the Yorkshire Oaks, was maybe just one step too far, perhaps. But she's done nothing wrong, pretty much all season. I know when she obviously got beat off Gayeth,
hard to complain about that.
It's hard to complain about that now. At the time, I think there was a few shocked heads, but I mean, at the same time, John Gosden had explained that she was only probably about 80 to 85% fit. So for her to get as close as she did, given that Gayeth had the benefits of runs and was fit, and has now obviously went on and won races since, that form now looks very good. And set her up nicely pretty much, and it's all roads to the Arc pretty much from here.
Yeah, in case anyone doesn't know, she'll go to Kempton next month for the September
Stakes,
yeah, which is the race that she won 2 years ago prior to winning her second Arc. So Connections have decided to go that route with her rather than try and win a third Yorkshire Oaks. And then, as you say, it's back to Paris and another crack at making history in the Arc. Do you think she's still the one to beat, or do you feel like Connections will rule the fact that Andre Fabre ran Valgeist last year? That was her chance to win it.
I mean,
can she at 6?
it's a big ask. It is a big ask, and I think like if there was ever going to be a chance to do it, obviously last year was a brilliant opportunity. But then again, she had the ground quite go against her. I mean, it did get really tacky out there. And she wore her heart on her sleeve. She ran out, and up until the last 50 yards or so, when she just emptied out on the ground, you thought you more or less had it in the bag. And don't get me wrong, Volgeist is a great horse, obviously loves the mud and everything, and just picked her off because the conditions were a bit more suitable. It was heartbreaking to watch in some ways because, like you really, really wanted her to do it. You wanted her to make that history. And obviously that's inspired them to try and go for it again this year. And I don't think that they would have kept her in training if they didn't think that she could do it. She's done nothing wrong so far this season. The Gaieth form, as we said, has already been boosted quite significantly, so that looks pretty good.
Her winning the King George, was that her still at her best, or was she just much superior to the two?
This is the thing.
That's the question.
It's a difficult one to answer though, because a 3-horse race in a Group 1 is pretty terrible, really, in terms of like a turnout. I mean, I kind of believe that of all the trainers in the UK, Ireland, obviously given what's going on, I know, but I mean, like, you kind of tell me that they didn't have some horses that they thought, you know what, we can maybe have a go at Enable. Maybe she's not as good as maybe, last year and whatever. And for it to be just a small 3-horse race was a little bit disappointing, but she couldn't have done it any more impressive, and you can only beat what's in front of you. So, she's obviously proven again that she's much better than Japan. Sovereign's an Irish Derby winner, so that's not bad form considering, he was a runaway Irish Derby winner. And again, try to lead them all from the front. But she made it look very easy, and it looked more like the Enable of last year compared to the Gaieth race, where she just got a little bit caught out for the pace. But that being said, I think we'll know more come the September Stakes where we're at. If the September Stakes is another like comfortable route, then maybe we can say, yeah, she's still the one to beat. Love has been very impressive, however, and obviously justifiably is probably most firms' favourite for that race now. But
it's the allowance that
it's the allowance that's going to make a lot of difference. As we saw, like obviously a few years ago with Sea of Class, I believe, who obviously got that massive weight allowance and almost got there. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. But I still think that she's just as good as ever, and hopefully the September Stakes will show that. And in all manner of fairy tales, we really want her to win the third. Oh, of course we do. So she can go out on a high. But for me, as long as she comes back safe and sound, she runs her heart out, even if she gets in the top 3, she's still a legend, and, she can then happily retire to whatever life after that. But, she owes nothing to anybody. She's won 2 Arcs. If she can get a third, it'll be amazing.
You've summed that up well. I mean, she is just a fabulous race mare. Her enthusiasm as much as anything. And the relationship she has with Frankie, it's quite incredible.
Well, it's amazing to watch, and for him to compliment her in such a way, given the horses that he's ridden over the years, he's rode some brilliant Group 1 colts, fillies, mares, stallions, whatever. For him to say that she is literally the best, that just sums it up, really.
I think someone came out with, there was a stat recently where she's won 10 Group 1s now. The previous highest amount of Group 1 victories he'd ever ridden on a horse was 5. I can't think, was that Golden Horn? I'm not sure who that was, who the horse was, but, so she's doubled that. I mean, Yeah, she is
Yeah.
fantastic. Talking about the arc, I don't know if this lad will be targeted at it or not. I mean, we've not seen him since the
Hmm.
St. Ledger last year, Logician.
Yep.
He's back in work now. If you're lucky enough to be on certain Facebook pages or like certain Facebook pages, you'll see pictures of him on the gallops in Newmarket, mainly on a Saturday. But he hasn't run since the St. Ledger. He had a career-threatening injury. I think it was a life-threatening injury at the start of the season, or the start of the year. He's come back from that. They're taking their time with him. I'm not sure what the plan is. I have the Cumberland Lodge at the back of my mind at Ascot. I'm not sure when that is. I think that's might be in a month's time or somewhere like that.
Yeah, I think it's like a sort of beginning of October time, I think.
Yeah, I don't think he'll make the arc. I think I could see him maybe going to Ascot and then maybe onto the Breeders' Cup, something like that. But I can't see him going to Longchamp somehow.
Yeah, I mean, I seen he had an entry, and I noticed he also had an entry in the Irish St. Ledger as well.
Right. Okay.
I
Yeah.
think Irish St. Ledger would be more my cup of tea for where I would like to see him go.
I think that's a bit optimistic, though. I think
But
that's
it's very
a couple of weeks,
optimistic, of
isn't it?
course, like given what's been going on. So yeah, I think like as you mentioned, Cumberland Lodge Stakes seems a logical sort of step. Then maybe sort of pushing on to something like the Breeders' Cup, or even just getting a run into him and keeping him, putting him away for maybe another year.
Yeah, I think he
Um,
will stay in training.
yeah, I think so. I think I mean, obviously they've made a lot of effort to try and bring him back to the track. So, obviously they're hoping that he's going to be okay, still retain all that ability. But there's no reason why he can't. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see with him.
I was fascinated with him this year. I was fascinated to see where they went with him in terms of mile and a half cup horse. It's a difficult one for John Gosling because he's got the best mile and a half horse around, let's say, at the minute in Enable, and he's got the best stayer we've seen in quite some time in Stradivarius.
Yeah, it's almost like a sort of between a rock and a hard place sort of thing, isn't it? He's my feeling was after watching the St. Ledger was that he would probably go down the sort of cup route, going for the stair distances. That was my feeling. But obviously, with entries in the Arc and stuff like that, they're obviously still eyeing up a mile and a half as well. So it'd be interesting to see when he comes back.
It is. He's fascinating alone trip wise. He is. He's won every race he's competed in. He's won over 10 furlongs, 12 furlongs, and 14 furlongs. But you just feel like he's tripless. So you're not too sure where he is, which is why I can see why you said the Irish St. Ledger. Given that he's won, that's the in between distance. But that's going to come too early. I think he'll be in training next year, and I think it'll be a lot easier for connections because Enable won't be around. And I don't know what they're doing with Stradivarius, but I mean, if Enable's not around, then you got the simple option of you go a mile and a half with Logician and see what happens. And I mean, there's plenty of good 2 mile races around now. Anyway, I mean, he doesn't have to be running against Stradivarius.
Yeah, that's it. They can still avoid each other, and even from mile and a half upwards, there's plenty of choice.
Yeah,
so.
Of course, Weekender, I'm not sure what's happened to him. I think he had one run, didn't he? And did he run in? Where did he ran at Chelmsford, didn't he? And he finished second. He was meant to run in Saudi Arabia, but he didn't. In that big meeting they had out there in.
Yes, the Saudi Cup one was it?
He was in a handicap, I think, but he never went. So I don't know what's happened to him. Crossbaton was sold today. So that's the older horses, and then we've got the 3-year-olds. I suppose we'll start with Franconia, who I've not read anything since last week at York when she finished last in the Yorkshire Oaks. But something. I mean, I think the stewards questioned connections afterwards, and they couldn't explain it. But
Yeah.
it wouldn't surprise me if she was in season or something was amiss, because she wasn't beat on ability alone. She was beaten far
Yeah, she was beaten considerable way, wasn't she?
too early for her to be weakening. I mean, it was just very disappointing for all the. She would have struggled to beat Love. Let's not kid ourselves. But I thought they were all pretty much well matched in terms of who would finish second and third, and or closely matched, I should say. And for her to bomb out the way she did,
Yeah, I definitely think something was definitely off. I mean, I don't know if maybe the sort of a little bit more cutting the ground maybe didn't quite suit, but I mean, to be beaten in such a manner was quite disappointing, especially seeing as the previous time when she beat Gold One, that form's been quite well advertised since Gold One has come out and won since.
she won a list. She won, I think, 2 races later, didn't she? She won the Gautrus or whatever it's called.
Yeah. So obviously when the Gold One has come out and won, it makes you wonder, has something maybe gone a bit wrong? But yeah, it was a bit of a disappointment of performance. I mean, there's no doubt Love was obviously the best horse in the race, but I definitely thought she was a contender to at least be second or third and to be a lot closer to the sort of podium places.
Yeah. One, I mean, hopefully she comes. We should say hopefully she comes back out this season and we see more of her. And I mean, she has ability. She's won 2 listed races now, so I mean, you'd think that. I mean, I mentioned the Pride Stakes for Quadrilateral. I mean, if she doesn't go, then you'd think that could be a place for Franconia back at home.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely an option for the kind of trip she runs and stuff.
Yeah. One colt that I'm very fond of, and I have been ever since his debut last year, is Czar, who by Kingman, you could probably have guessed that. He's won his last 2 at Yarmouth when the race didn't go to plan, and he still came out and won. And similarly at Ascot last time, when Frankie admitted afterwards that he didn't feel like he gave him a good ride, but the colt still came through and won. I've just got this lad down as, you know, he's the group horse in a handicap. Well, maybe not group. I mean, he's definitely listed class.
Yeah.
If he didn't make listed class, I'd be very disappointed. I think he's going places this one.
Yeah, definitely. And after that Ascot win, that was very impressive. As you've kind of mentioned, obviously the Tory wasn't too keen on how he'd panned it out. But yeah, he was very impressive and, you know, kept on against some nice, decent handicappers who've all, you know, run to a decent level already. That was a class 2. He's definitely got the ability to break into listed class and possibly further. He could keep improving at the mile, for sure.
Yeah, I think he was the one. I mentioned that Godolphin horse earlier, Alsa Haley. I think he ran in his maiden. I don't think he won it, or he may have done. They were definitely in the same maiden last year.
Yeah, it was their first run. So Alsa Hill was second. Saul was fourth.
Yeah, it was a Hannon horse that I think won it for Hamdan. I couldn't even begin to tell you what the name of the horse, but yeah, that was where I connected him. But yeah, I do. I think this lad's a good horse. Sunray Major, I was really taken with when he won first time out at Newmarket on his debut back in the spring. Half brother to Kingman, Sire of Czar. But then he disappointed in a winner's race back at Newmarket. I think it was only like a fortnight later. And I thought it would be a cakewalk for him before he got a handicap mark, and then they made up their mind with him. But he disappointed terribly.
He was a little bit disappointing, especially because he was such a warm order to, you know, follow up after that good debut, especially at Newmarket as well. Obviously, same course. You know, he'd absolutely bolted up at 8-11 on a debut, and then like next time for whatever reason it just didn't happen. But as you say, maybe the quick turnaround could have possibly been behind that. I mean, he was only turned out 13 days later.
Yeah.
You know, so maybe he just didn't appreciate the quick turnout.
which could explain
Yeah,
why it's been off since.
yeah. I mean, we haven't seen him on the track since, so maybe something came to light afterwards. But I definitely feel like there's more to come from him. He's definitely got a bit more in the locker, I think.
Portrush, who is a Frankel three-part sister to Enable, which is unfortunate for her. I don't think she'll never be. I don't think she'll ever be as good. But she won. Was it Yarmouth? She won at Yarmouth, didn't she?
Yeah.
Second time out. She ran well. You mentioned Gold Wand. She was second to Gold Wand on debut at Newbury. And then she went and won at Yarmouth. Got our plate on. Excuse me. That was a good performance, and I would imagine they'll try and get some black type into her as quickly as possible. I mean, I don't know what handicap mark she's been given, but I think it's a waste of time, to be honest, because I think they'll be looking for a listed race somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Needed every yard of the 1 mile too to get up. I watched it back, and travelled really well. Looked as though she was always going to pick them up. It seemed to take a bit of time, but she did get there eventually. Ironically, against another Juddmonte and Tanita, as obviously splitting the Godolphin one in between two. But I do think that there's more to come, and as you say, they'll probably be going for that black type. I did notice there was a entry in the St. Ledger as well, which might be a bit speculative, I don't know at this point. But there's some scope to say that she might stay, but I think it might be very limits of the distances she can probably go. I would imagine 1 mile, 2.5 miles is probably more likely. But you never know. They may give it a go. She's down as an entry in the St. Ledger, so I don't know if they'll still go down that route. But I would have thought they might have got another run into her before that, if they were thinking of going down that route anyway.
Yeah, you would have thought she may have run in, say, the Gautrus or something.
Yeah, something like that. That would have been the sort of expected race, I would have thought. Something along those lines anyway. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. But yeah, I definitely think you're right. I think it's probably going to be best to go straight into like listed Group 3 company, something like that, see what happens.
I mean, they've got nothing to lose now. She's won. That's all that matters, really. So she's won, and, we'll move on to the 2-year-olds. I don't think, no disrespect to the other 3-year-olds, but I think we'll move on now. And Gosden has, yes, he's had 2 2-year-olds run so far. He's had Side Shot, who was 5th today. He didn't know what was happening. And then the other one, Senita, Frankel filly, 2nd both times. First at Newmarket when she ran on well, finished nicely, and then she disappointed. I thought she'd win at Doncaster.
Yeah, definitely. Having watched that back, obviously she was turned over very skinny odds, having made that really good debut. I thought that she would definitely pick it up at Doncaster. However, the one that's won, I mean, pretty much led all the way. She came to try and make a challenge. It didn't work out. She didn't go past. But them two have pulled a long way clear of the rest. So maybe the one that was in front might have been a little bit above average.
Saying that, that one that was in front was 6 lengths behind her at Newmarket on debut.
Oh, was it? Oh, sorry, I didn't even notice that. So
that was some turnaround in that's what disappointed me the most. That she was so far ahead of her at Newmarket, and then she just didn't get going till late. I think she'll win a race. I think she'll win a race, but I don't.
I really think though, like if that was the case, if she'd obviously beaten that one so far on the first occasion, there should have been no real reason that the turnaround should have happened in the manner that it did anyway. I mean, like I said, she come there full of running. She had every opportunity. It wasn't like she was blocked in or anything like that. There's no real excuses.
No. Right. We'll quickly run through some of these 2-year-olds. We've got Alpha King, who's Czar's brother. Chiasma, or Chiasma, however we're saying it. Sister to Frankel. I think there might be a few people trying to turn up when she makes her debut.
Yeah.
And obviously a sister to Noble Mission as well. It's just nice, I guess, to have another offspring of kind in training. She has struggled in recent years to produce foals, so it's nice that she's got another one that we can look forward to.
Absolutely, and obviously given the breeding and all the relatives and things like that, yeah, she looks an exciting one.
We've also got a Sea the Stars half brother to Enable called Dirab, which I think is a town in Afghanistan or somewhere like that, Azerbaijan, somewhere like that. Monsoon Moon, who's a half sister by Kingman to Logician. There's her. But the one I like, or the one that I thought would have been out by now, is Civil Code, who by Muhara, who he was by Oasis Dream, I think, off the top of my head, out of Hella Green, which makes him a half brother to Calix, who was the impressive winner of the commentary stakes. Not last year, the year before. I was looking forward to it. I thought this lad would have been out by now, so I'm a bit disappointed we've not seen him. But that doesn't mean a great deal in the grand scheme of things. There's no reason why he couldn't be a nice horse.
Yeah.
Run yet. I was looking forward to.
Yeah, I mean, he's one of them, and even Dirab that you mentioned, another one with the sort of great breeding pan. But I think with a lot of Gosden 2-year-olds, as we've seen with the likes of Enable and stuff like that, when they made their debuts, it tends to be maybe more towards the sort of autumn, so maybe September, October, November time when they might come out, and make their debuts. Tends to be favoured at Newcastle, ironically. Tends to send a lot of good ones up here. So maybe we'll see.
Yeah. Who was the other one? There was another one recently. There was a Enable that went up there, and it was Palace Pier went up there earlier in the year.
Palace Pier, yeah.
He went up there.
I think Stradivarius did as well, I think.
Oh, I don't know about that. Too long ago for me.
I think, if I remember right.
But I know Golden Horn started on the all. He started. Did he not win at Wolverhampton? Golden Horn or Jack Hobbs or yeah. So he's not averse to running good horses on the all weather. I think he's popularised that in recent years. So yeah, you're right. If Civil Code goes up there for a novice at Newcastle, we can start dreaming of the 2,000 guineas next year.
Well, this is it. Yeah. Dreams might come true.
There we go. We'll move on to Charlie Hills. We'll keep this short. We'll only talk about the one horse, and that is Tilsit, who. What was we saying about good horses going up to Newcastle?
Well, yeah, good horses winning by 19 lengths. I mean, I know at the time, I think you even sort of sarcastically said that it wasn't a very good race in much more.
There was no sarcasm involved. It was a race.
Yeah, it was a dreadful race on paper. And I mean, having ran down sort of a close second to Al Salt on debut, there was no surprise that he obviously won. I mean, 19 lengths in any race is impressive, but I mean, it wasn't a very good race, admittedly. And so we were probably thinking, well, come this Group 3 that he's entered in, is he really up to this class? But he proved it. It was a very impressive performance, and he beat some, decent looking horses who'd already had the benefits of a few more runs as well. Tracked really well. Did hang about a little bit, just obviously when he got to the front, he wandered around a little. But there was no doubt about it. He was the best horse in that race by a long way.
I think we should name this podcast after him. Wasn't Al Sahali in that race at Goodwood? He wasn't, was he?
No, he wasn't in that one. They had Calusi in, which was similar ownership. That was the Crowley one. Then that was the expected hot pot of the race. But yeah, he well and truly burst that bubble.
Right. Well, I'm still going to mention Elsa Haley once more before we end this. I'm going to get him in there somewhere. But yeah, I mean, what saddens me really is that this lad is by first defence, and Juddmonte, after Arrogate burst on the scene, allowed first defence to go off to Saudi Arabia and stand over there for some reason. Um, in a way, it wasn't surprising given that he's by Unbridled Song, the same sire as Arrogate, who sadly is no longer with us. So it wasn't a massive surprise, but it's just a shame given that we're talking about Tilsit, there's Siskin. I always thought First Defence was a decent sire, and he could do the job. And I mean, Tilsit, I was surprised. They mentioned after he won the Thoroughbred Stakes at Goodwood that he may turn up again over course and distance in the Celebration Mile, but he's not been entered in that on Saturday, so we won't be seeing him there. Just wonder where he might.
Looking down the sort of line, maybe something like the Jewel Stakes, Group 2, possibly something like that.
Won that, yeah.
That to me seems like a logical target, especially after a Group 3 win. Aside from that, there's probably not much else sort of Group 1 wise in the UK. Possibly QE2. That would probably be the next sort of one.
It's a bit more open now, given unfortunately Muhafa retired today.
Yeah,
the Sussex Stakes winner.
Which was a shame to see. But yeah, that sort of field might be the sort of one. But I don't know. Maybe they might consider taking both in. But I mean, it's all a bit speculative at the moment. He has no entries, so. Yeah.
He's a nice horse going forward, though. I think
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, after his debut, with like was mentioned, Al Sultan, they pulled a long way clear of the field that day. I mean, he pummeled the opposition, obviously, in the next one, which we've mentioned, and that Group 3 win wasn't a fluke. It was a really good, solid performance.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't the win that you'd hope for, the way he did it, given the way he hung and the interference, but he was still the best horse in that race.
Oh, yeah, well, that's what I said before. Like, even though there was still that sort of greenness a little about him, where he was kind of wandering about, and he got to the front, and I think maybe after winning so far the last time and left them all back in the Tatey field, like, he's probably thought, oh, well, am I going to do it again?
Well, he did that there as well. I mean, he did that at Newcastle. He just sort of drifted across, and I think once he grows up and matures, I think he could be a serious horse with Charlie Hills. It's just a shame that at this moment in time, Charlie Hills hasn't been sent any 2-year-olds. Quite a surprise.
Yeah, which was quite surprising. Yeah,
if Tilsit won a Group 1 by the end of the year, and he wasn't sent any, you'd wonder. Hugo Palmer, again, we'll only mention a handful here. Unfortunately, he lost Collide recently.
Yeah, so was he sold off, was he?
Yeah, he's changed ownership. I think he's going to end up in Australia. He ran in France at the weekend in, excuse me, in the race that, what's his name? The Frankel horse. Is it Chase the Wind? Closed.
Yes.
His name is. He ran in that race. I never watched it, but I saw he finished 6th or something. So I would imagine the Melbourne Cup's on his radar. Excuse me, which will please Francesca Kimani if she's listening to this. Emissary, I suppose, was the big talking horse at the start of the season.
Yep.
He was second dominant. And then there's nothing wrong. It is just a tickly cough. Ran down the field in the Derby.
Yeah. I mean, I must admit, I did have a small each way bet on him for the Derby, a bit speculative, admittedly. But I just thought, well, he had some decent relatives, and, he's, a horse that could have, outran his odds. It was a big step up after 2 runs going straight in the Derby, admittedly. But again, as we've already mentioned, given what's went on this year, chances have been a bit few and far between. But I just thought that maybe on the last run, I thought he might have run a little better than the eventual outcome. He didn't do too bad. It wasn't exactly like a terrible run, but I thought this was a good opportunity to try and get the season back on track after obviously finishing down the field in the Derby. So it'd be interesting to see where he goes next. I would personally think that he might go back up to 1.5 miles. Would you be thinking that's his sort of style?
I would. I don't know what it was, but I was just not confident going into that race at Newmarket. I don't know whether it was to drop down to 10 furlongs or what. I just didn't have a good feeling about it. I know it's easy to say afterwards, but I just wasn't. I wasn't thinking he'll take this step down in class in his stride and he'll win by 5 lengths. And he doesn't seem to have much of a turn of foot to me. I mean, the way he ran at Goodwood in his listed race when he was second, he needed every yard of that. And yeah, I think he'll go back up in distance. I mean, he could be, again, maybe speculative, but something like the November handicap later on, something like that. I wouldn't expect him to be running in stakes races again this year.
No, I think you're on the right lines there.
Yeah, he is the type that I could see staying in training. He's a half brother to Workforce who, ironically, I wouldn't say didn't improve at 4, but it wasn't as worthwhile as Connections were hoping, keeping him in training. But hopefully this lad can do a bit better. I mean, he's not a bad colt at all. He just hasn't done enough so far to justify. I don't know about the height, but Hugo Palmer was very sweet on him early on, and he just hasn't, at the minute, justified his belief. But there's still plenty of time. The 2-year-olds, there's only 4 at the moment, and I think on paper there is definitely one standout, and that is Brunera, or however we're saying it, again by Jubawi, out of Romantica, who won the Prix Jean Romanet when trained by André Fabre in France. She was also second in the Breeders' Cup filly and mare turf behind Dank, if my memory serves me right, Michael Stout, Dan Silly mare. She's the clear standout for me. Romantica obviously is out of Banks Hill. And it's a great family, and I wouldn't be overly sure this filly will run this year, but I think certainly next year over 10 furlongs. I think hopefully she can do well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I think there's definite potential in the breeding there. Another one I like is a Cos. I think from some nice relations there.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely a couple of nice looking 2-year-olds, and whether they get out this year or not, I don't know. But
she was entered the other week. I can't remember where she was at. I think it may have been Newmarket. A Cost was entered, so it might not be too long before we see her actually.
Brilliant.
So we'll have to wait and see. Talking of 2-year-olds, quickly mention Amanda Perrett, who doesn't have any 2-year-olds, unfortunately, and I don't think the way it's looking, will be training for Juddmonte for too much longer. She had 2 horses sell today at Tattersalls, and she's got 2 more. She's got 2 at the minute. Failed Spare, who I'm surprised wasn't sold today, and Transition, who he just hasn't gone on since he won back-to-back races either side of the new year. It's a shame given the history of the place with Guy Harwood and Dancing Brave. But I guess that's just the way it goes. So Michael Stout will finish with, no better man. The older horses he has this year, they've been a bit underwhelming. I mean, Sangarius, we've seen run once behind Lord North up at Haydock, wasn't it? I think it was, in the Brigadier Gerard. Jubiloso's had 1 run. I think it was at Royal Ascot. She disappointed. I think she's entered at the weekend though. I think she's entered again. And Derivo, decent handicapper last year, hasn't really gone on. Anything you want to just mention about those three?
Yeah, well, Sangarius, again, like as you mentioned, a little bit of a disappointing comeback. Same with Jubiloso. Obviously, was quite well fancied, but you know, it just flattened out very quickly. Similar sort of profile to the final run of 2019 that Jubiloso put in. Just seemed a bit lacking that cutting edge, especially when a lot better was expected. Again, it's probably something similar to Hedman that we mentioned earlier. Obviously been off the track for quite a while, so maybe just in need of that run and maybe a stretch of the legs. Royal Ascot's always a hard place to come back first time up as well. But she was fancied, so it was a little bit disappointing. But she does have that entry, as you mentioned, the weekend. So hopefully,
what's she entered in?
So she has an entry in a race at Goodwood. It's the Supreme Stakes.
Right,
At
okay,
Goodwood.
yeah, over 7, yeah.
Yeah, so hopefully we'll see something a bit better from her. Derivo, I think there's handicaps still to be won with Derivo. I think that there's still potential off the mark, but maybe possibly a step up in trip might suit, because he has won over 1 mile 4 at Newcastle.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that. I remember that day he won, because on paper you'd think a mile is as far as he wants to go. I wouldn't have had him down as a 1.5 mile horse, but he stayed that really well. And interestingly, he's in, I think it's 4 or 5 runs since Newcastle. He's been back down to 10 furlongs. Personally, I'd like to see him go back up. I'd be very interested in him back over 1.5 miles.
Yeah,
because I think he's just hit a ceiling at the minute.
Yeah, that's it. And I watched his most recent run, and I just felt like he tried hard, but just didn't have the gears for the 10. And I feel like going back up would be more suitable. There's possibly some handicaps he can probably hit sort of later in the year. Maybe the November handicap might be something a bit more up his street. Going back up in distance. That would be my sort of idea of a race for him.
The 3-year-olds, I thought they looked a nice bunch at the start of the year. They've not done too badly. Jovial, who's Jubiloso's half sister, has been listed placed. That's good for her. Ransom made an impressive winning debut at Lingfield at the start of when racing commenced. He hasn't been seen since. Snow Shower ran 4th in the Pretty Polly on her return. She's not been seen since. Society Lion's done well. I know he was 3rd the other day at Chelmsford, but I think he'll be winning again soon. And you mentioned her earlier, Tanita, the Frankel filly, who was 3rd behind Portrush. I mean, she looks like she'll win a race as well.
Yeah, absolutely. If there's one horse that I'm going to recommend as a definite handicap winner, it's Tanita. I think she, ran absolutely brilliantly in that race. Portrush is obviously, as we mentioned earlier, is a good-looking filly, but I know that Tanita's definitely got everything in the locker to win a few handicaps, possibly even go a little bit higher. But yeah, she's definitely one I'm going to be interested in.
The 2-year-olds, the only one that's run so far is Maximal, who, again, we're talking about the Joyeuse filly, colt rather. He's a half-brother to Jubiloso and Jovial. I thought he was unlucky not to win on debut at Newbury. He was mugged right on the line. And then he ran well at Sandown at the weekend. I just think he wants a mile. I just think I don't think he's quick enough for 7, personally.
Yeah, that's it. Unlucky to probably still be a maiden, but yeah, I definitely think a step up will suit.
Yeah, and then of the on-race lot, again, I mean, we've got a Kingman half brother to Expert Eye, a Breeders' Cup winner in Duty of Care. We've got Maytal, who is a half brother, half sister, sorry, but by Sea the Stars to Midday. We've got a midday filly by Galileo called Noon Star. And then at the bottom, we've got Fala, or Tala, however we want to say that, again by Jubawi, out of Timepiece, who was a personal favourite of mine. I think we went racing one time when she ran.
Yeah, I think we did. Yeah, it must have been one of the days when we got down to Newmarket. But yeah, that was a long time ago though.
Yeah, many moons. But yeah, I mean, again, some really nice 2-year-olds. A bit like John Gosden, you know, you don't know where to look really. There's so many.
Yeah, absolutely. I quite like Noon Star. I think like the Galileo Midday combination, and obviously all of those sort of relatives like Midterm and Maury and things like that. Definitely a good family, a family that obviously Sir Michael's familiar with too. Definitely think Noon Star's one to watch.
Yeah. Right. Well, that's all the British-based trainers. We'll leave it there. We'll probably do another one next week with the French ones and the Irish ones, and yeah, we'll take it from there, Elsa Haley. I knew I'd get it.
You get it one more time. I knew it was going to come in one more time. I was waiting for it.
Right then, we'll wrap it up. Thanks, Craig, for taking part, and thanks everyone for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. I've actually enjoyed it more than I thought I would, and we're still friends. So
yeah. It's been a productive hour and a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Right then, I'll speak to you later, and again, thank you for listening.
Thanks very much. Cheers.